Over the past year, I've shared so many of our everyday meals. Home cooking from a busy mom who loves to cook, get creative in the kitchen, and feed her hungry family. Today, I'm sharing my top 25 favorite dinners and snacks that I've made and loved over the past year. You can expect wholesome, nourishing, made-from-scratch meals, plus snack ideas that are simple, satisfying, and family-approved. These are some of my favorites and yours too. This is a longer, cozy video, perfect to play in the background while you're cooking, folding laundry, or just going about your day. My hope is that it nourishes your home, your heart, and your table. I'm not a professional chef, just a mom who loves good food, getting things done, and creating a peaceful, welcoming home. So come on into my kitchen. I hope you feel right at home here. I'm starting off by seasoning some potatoes really well with some fresh garlic, rosemary, salt, pepper, and olive oil, and I'm going to roast that at about 400 until it is nice and crispy. I cut up some chicken into small pieces and adding salt, oregano, cumin, smoked paprika, lots of fresh garlic, some yogurt, a squeeze of fresh lemon juice, and some olive oil. Mix that up well and let it marinate for a bit, and when the potatoes are getting closer to being done, you can lower the temp to 375 and bake those for 15 minutes or so. Now I'm moving on to making some yogurt sauce. This is one of my favorite sauces to make. You're going to drain the liquid out of a whole cucumber, dump that into a bowl, and add in some whole milk Greek yogurt as much as you would like. I like it pretty thick and heavy on the cucumbers. Now add in some flavor. We're going to do some olive oil, dill, salt, and grate a clove of garlic. And then you can add in a splash of apple cider vinegar, and you can also add some fresh lemon juice and salt it more until you're happy with the flavor. This is so good. As an experiment, I added a sheet pan over my potatoes to see if it would steam them well before I roasted them up to get them nice and crispy, because red potatoes take longer to cook on the inside. I prepped some sourdough naan bread earlier in the day. I used about half freshly milled hard white wheat, and the rest is all-purpose flour. I will link the recipe below on what I used. This ended up turning out really good, and it was very easy. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and make the hummus now. I actually don't have the tahini, I don't have any more cumin, and I don't have basil, which I normally use for this. So I'm just gonna make it with what I do have, and I'm gonna add some parsley. I normally don't add parsley, but I thought that might do something fun to the hummus. So I'm gonna get my food processor and we'll do that. Here is the full spread. This was inspired by one of the most memorable meals of my life in Greece. I had a traditional gyro. It was flavorful meat and a rich yogurt sauce served up on a soft, warm, fluffy pita bread. But of course, this naan bread is a great replacement for that. I actually think it works better. So I hope this gives you some inspiration. You can serve this up however you like, put whatever you want on it. My kids like to do just the chicken and yogurt sauce, and that is perfectly good all on its own. This recipe came from America's Test Kitchen. I modified it just a little bit. So I have a 4 to 5 pound chuck roast here, and you want to pat it dry and season it well on both sides with salt and pepper. Don't be shy here. And then take your butcher's twine and your scissors, if you have kitchen shears, and you want to separate this meat at the natural seam where there's a layer of fat, and then also trim some of that fat off. You don't want too much for this. I am using ghee, and I am turning on my slow cooker saute function to high. I'm using ghee because it has a higher smoke point, so I'm not worried about it burning as I'm searing the meat. So I'm cutting this meat into another piece so that I can have 3 even pieces. Then you're gonna tie each piece up with butcher's twine. The original recipe called for a chuck eye roast, which I guess is different from a chuck roast. So you should have 2 pieces if you're using a chuck eye roast. And then you're going to sear the meat really well on every side, and you need to be patient with this process. So while that's happening, you can go and work on your veggies. I'm chopping up 2 stalks of celery, 2 onions. I'm gonna do 6 cloves of garlic. You can just smash the whole head of garlic and it releases the cloves. And then you can smash each clove and it easily releases the skin. It helps to have a little container close by where you can throw all of your scraps. I did 4 whole large carrots, and I'm chopping them in half lengthwise and then cutting them about 2 inches long. So once your meat is seared on all sides, you can transfer it to a plate, and then you're gonna add in your onions and celery. Also add in a half teaspoon of salt and a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper and let it saute for 5 to 8 minutes or so. In a small bowl, you're gonna mix together some more seasonings. I added in this umami blend, a half teaspoon, and I also added in a teaspoon of onion powder. And then you're gonna do 2 tablespoons of flour and a teaspoon of thyme. And then you have your tomato paste ready and your garlic ready. These are your flavor enhancers, as well as a half cup of red wine and a half cup of bone broth. And so those are the things that are gonna make your classic pot roast taste absolutely delicious. So this is all ready to go. You just add in that blend of flour and seasonings, mix it up, and then add in the tomato paste and your garlic and mix it up and let it cook for about a minute until fragrant, and then add in your wine and broth mixture. I added in yellow small potatoes and about a pound of carrots, and then add in your meat, just nestle it into the veggies, and then add the accumulated juices from the plate that your meat was on. And then you can add a couple of bay leaves and then just cover the lid. Then set it to low for 9 to 10 hours or on high for 6 to 7 hours. My house is loud right now, but I'm starving. Dinner is almost ready. The great thing about slow cooker meals is, yes, it was a lot of work in the front end to get it going, but now it's dinner time and I've been able to do so much today. I was able to work out, get a lot of work done, do things around the house, and now dinner's just like ready for me. So that's why I really love slow cooker meals. Bread is in the oven, and then I'm giving this like 30 more minutes, maybe less. And then I'm gonna get it out and let it rest for like 20 minutes and then eat it. This meal turned out amazing, and so I shared the recipe on my blog, so you can print that recipe. You can also print the grocery list and all the recipes from this video in case you want to copy my meal plan for the week. I've made it really easy for you. The link is in the description. Set a medium or large pot to medium heat and add 1/4 cup of butter, 1/4 cup of honey, and 1/4 cup of brown sugar. Mix that together well until it melts and starts to bubble up. You want this to thicken into a syrupy situation. Once that is accomplished, you're going to turn off the heat and add in a tablespoon of almond butter. Mix that well, and then you're going to add in a teaspoon of cinnamon and 2 teaspoons of vanilla. When you add the vanilla, it starts to bubble again, which I think is so cool. So you're gonna add a pinch of salt now and 1.5 cups of oats. Give that a little stir before we add in the next ingredients. Then you're gonna add 2 cups of rice cereal. After that, you're gonna add in 1/4 cup of mix-ins. So that is 4 tablespoons of seeds of your choice. So I like to do pumpkin seeds and flax seeds. You can also add in sunflower seeds, just anything you would like that adds a bit of crunch and nutrition to these granola bars. You're gonna line a loaf pan with parchment paper. I'm using a larger 12-inch loaf pan here, which I've linked in the description, but you can also use smaller loaf pans if that's all you have. You could try using 2 of them, but I like the size of these granola bars. So you're gonna put it all in there and you're gonna top it with some chocolate chips. Mini chocolate chips is best if you have those, and then press it down. And then we're gonna stick it in the refrigerator and let it harden up, and later on we'll cut it into slices. After cutting them, I also like to store these in the refrigerator so that they are nice and crunchy, but they are so good and I know you'll love them. Let's get started on homemade sourdough pizza crust. This is something you can make ahead of time, store in the refrigerator, pull out just what you need for that night, and it can keep for up to a week in the refrigerator. Then you can put it in the freezer if you don't end up using it. You can make whatever kind of pizza you want, but the idea is have it ready, have it on hand, and have a delicious pizza dinner whenever you want. First, you need to prep your ingredients. I have my active, bubbly sourdough starter ready to go that I fed earlier in the morning, and this is about midday. I'm getting salt, flour, filtered water, and a food scale to work with. Now this recipe comes from natashaskitchen.com. I will link that below. It's a great sourdough pizza crust recipe, and I've made a lot of different kinds, and this one so far has been my favorite. First, you're gonna add 500 grams of flour. I used all-purpose flour. She recommends 00 flour. And then add 12 grams of sea salt. And then you're gonna mix that up with a whisk. And then you're gonna add 335 grams of room temperature filtered water. And then 100 grams of active sourdough starter. You're going to mix that well with a firm spatula and get it nice and incorporated, and then use your hands to knead it just a little bit until it's all incorporated, and then cover it with some plastic wrap and let it rest for 30 minutes. When you come back to it, you're going to flour a clean work surface and knead your dough for about 2 minutes or so until it's nice and smooth and elastic. Mine was taking a little longer to get there, and so I also shaped mine into a nice round shape. Then you're going to oil a clean bowl with olive oil, cover that with plastic wrap again, let it sit and rise for the next 4 to 6 hours. So now you get a break and you can come back to it later. All right, so it is the end of the evening. We just had dinner. I need to clean up and do dishes, but this has been sitting out for about 4 hours and it's looking good. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut it into 4 pieces. And I'm gonna put it in these. These are little deli containers that you can buy on Amazon, and I will link that below. They are so handy. I use them all the time for leftovers and just like ingredients if you're prepping ingredients. So anyways, I'm gonna oil these, and then I'm going to cut this into 4, put them in here, and then we're gonna store them in the fridge, and they'll do an overnight bulk fermentation. Now you're just going to cut your dough into 4 pieces and shape each piece into a tight round shape and place it into an oiled container. This folding method helps to create a lot of tension in the dough, which is going to give you that tight round shape that you want. We love to do pizza night in our house on Friday nights, and having 4 pizza doughs ready to go at any time makes it so easy for each person to customize their pizza, and it saves a lot of money on takeout. To bake your pizza, you want to get a pizza stone, put it on the center rack, and crank your oven up to 550 degrees. You want high heat for this. While the oven is heating up, you can dust your surface with semolina flour and start shaping your dough. You can use your fists to gently stretch the dough. You want the pizza to be about 11 to 12 inches wide. The semolina is important here because it allows the dough to easily slide off the pizza peel. When you top your pizzas, be careful not to overload it so it's not too heavy. I'm using San Marzano tomatoes blended with garlic and a pinch of salt, and topping it with fresh mozzarella and some other cheeses. You want to slide that onto the piping hot pizza stone and let it bake. Bake your pizza for 8 to 10 minutes until it's golden and you see some big bubbles in the crust. It helps to use your pizza peel to give the pizza a little turn halfway through cooking, and then just set it on a cutting board and cut them all up and serve them up. This is a great cheap meal that you can make for your family that feels really extra special, especially if you have the pizza dough ready ahead of time. You can have it on any night of the week. This cute little slice.
Too light.
Cute. Dun dun dun. Ding. Yay. Here you go.
Thank you.
Welcome. If you have a smoker, this is also a great way to cook your pizza. You can put your pizza stone right in the smoker and heat it up to as high as it goes. For me, it's 500, and just the same as before. Just put it in there, give it about 10 minutes or so, keep an eye on it, but this turns out so delicious. And you don't have to do sourdough pizza crust. This recipe here is actually a yeasted pizza crust recipe that I just found online. I believe this one is Half-Baked Harvest. So just have fun with it and don't think too hard about it. Just enjoy.
Pizza! Pizza! The crust is juicy.
Doesn't that look good?
I want this piece. I want this piece. Can I have this part? Can I have this part?
No, stop it. Put the thing back.
I want half. How do you feel that?
I have 2 chicken breasts here that I cut thinner, and then you want to pat them dry and season them with salt and pepper on both sides, and you're going to sear that really well in some olive oil. Make sure both sides have a nice crust. It should take 3 minutes or so per side. And now prep your veggies. I have 4 jalapenos here. I made sure to cut out the ribs and seeds so that it wouldn't be too spicy. And now I'm removing the chicken from the slow cooker and adding it to a pan. I'm adding just a little more olive oil to the pan, and I'm going to saute the celery and onions and jalapenos. And then you want to add in a teaspoon of salt and just let that go for maybe about 8 minutes or so. I like to use a lot of garlic, and so I actually used a whole head of garlic and just got rid of some of the smaller cloves. And then into a little bowl, you're gonna add 2 teaspoons of cumin, 1 teaspoon of oregano, and then a teaspoon of ground coriander. Add a teaspoon of salt, and then pour a little bit more olive oil in the pan because it was looking dry. Add in the garlic and the seasonings. Let those cook a little bit until fragrant, about a minute. Mix it all together, and then add in a can of green chilies. Mix that in, and then you're gonna put your chicken back in there and cover it with broth. Put the lid back on, set it on low for 6 hours. About 5 hours later, you're going to add your beans. Reserve 1 cup of the beans and 2 cups of the broth with the veggies in it and puree that together. This is what's going to add the creaminess and thicken up your chili a bit more. And then take your chicken out and shred it, add it back in, and then add in your corn and also the puree that you just made. You're also going to add another can of beans, so you have some whole beans in there and then you have some pureed in there. And then you're going to put the lid on and on low cook for another hour or so. This next part was just to use up some corn tortillas that we had, so I cut them up into a chip shape, tossed them in some grapeseed oil, and then salted them and baked them at 375 for 15 to 20 minutes, and they are nice little crunchy chips. And while that is going on, you can prep all of your toppings. We like to serve chili with rice, so I cooked this in some bone broth, and I feel like if you serve it with rice, it stretches the meal a little bit further. We did for toppings sour cream, cheese, cilantro, avocado, and some tortilla chips. You can also just keep it simple and just do sour cream and cheese, but we had all these items on hand. And I've added my blog link in the description, which has all of the recipes for this. I'm measuring out 8 cups of whole milk that I'm going to heat up on the stove with 3/4 teaspoon of salt. As you're heating up, you want to continually stir it to avoid burning on the bottom, and once it hits 180 degrees, you can remove it from the heat. I'm adding 1/4 cup of white vinegar, and I'm going to stir it around pretty quickly for about 10 to 30 seconds until you see curdles forming. Then you can let it sit for the next 5 minutes. Then you can pour it through a fine mesh strainer until all of the whey and the curdles separate. You can let it sit for about 10 minutes. This recipe calls for ground beef and sweet Italian sausage. I only have ground beef and ground pork, so I'm using seasonings and sweetener to add lots of flavor to mimic a sausage flavor. I'm adding about a teaspoon of salt, a half teaspoon of oregano, a bit of thyme, sage, basil, and a teaspoon of garlic. Adding the onions and garlic, also adding a splash of white vinegar and about a tablespoon of maple syrup. Back to my ricotta, I'm just squeezing out a bit of that extra whey, which I actually didn't have to do, and then I'm adding it to a container to put it in the fridge for the next 2 hours. I have some leftover crushed tomatoes in the fridge, so I'm pouring that in, and then also adding in another can of diced tomatoes. And then I'm grabbing some tomato paste and some beef bone broth. I love it when I can use up all the bits of ingredients I have left in my fridge, and they all worked well for this lasagna sauce. I'm also adding a tablespoon of sugar, a little bit more oregano. All right, so my meat sauce is pretty much done. And now that that's out of the way, I can just let it simmer for the next couple hours, go get some work done, and come back to making the rest of dinner later. All right, so this ricotta, it's an America Test Kitchen recipe, and they're saying I should process 1/4 cup of heavy cream in with the ricotta, and that sounds delicious. So I think that's gonna turn out really good. It was a bit hard to blend this with the immersion blender, I think because I squeezed out so much of the whey, it was thicker, so you should probably use a food processor instead. Now I'm just blending up some Parmesan cheese to get a powder. I'm making the cheese mixture for the lasagna, so in a mixing bowl I'm adding 1.5 cups of cottage cheese, 1.5 cups of ricotta, 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese. Also adding in some fresh parsley, a little bit of salt, a little bit of oregano, and that is your cheese mixture. And now you can start assembling your lasagna. All right, so I'm just gonna stick this in the oven at 350 for 45 minutes uncovered, and we'll see what it looks like. I've got my extra lasagna sauce all packaged and ready for the freezer. Now I'm just gonna label it, and I'm so looking forward to using this when the time comes. The lasagna is ready, and if you're wondering what my kids are up to during this time while I'm cooking in the kitchen, well, we are on spring break at the moment, and so the kids are up to all sorts of shenanigans. Uh-oh, we got chairs. Everyone agreed that this lasagna was over the top good, so I'm gonna try and write up the recipe of what I did this night and post it on my blog, and I'll put the link in the description. This was definitely a keeper. Can't wait to make this again. So yummy. And we were eating it with some homemade bread and butter. Such a good meal. Sometimes I like to make a double batch of this lasagna and then freeze it. This makes a great freezer meal. I will assemble them completely and put them in these foil trays and then cover it with foil, and then I write on the foil to bake at 375 for 45 minutes and then to uncover it for 10 to 15 minutes to toast up the cheese a little more. We are starting off with Fudgy snack bars. Into the food processor, you're gonna add 1 cup of pecans, 1 cup of walnuts, 1/2 cup of cocoa powder, 1.5 cups of pitted medjool dates, and then you're gonna do a pinch of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla, and then you're gonna process that. Sometimes it helps to process this in steps by giving the nuts a quick process and then adding the dates and so forth. You know you're almost done when it starts to look like a dough, but you want to be careful not to over process this as well because it can start to release the oils from the nuts. Near the end, you're just going to add a small handful of chocolate chips and just pulse that to get those chopped up and incorporated. You're gonna end up with this fudgy dough, and you're just gonna scoop it into a parchment lined loaf pan, and then you're gonna press it down. We're gonna put this in the freezer, and later we can slice it up into little squares. I actually keep those in the freezer because I think they taste best coming directly from the freezer, but this is a great little treat and it's full of healthy fats, so it keeps your kids full and satisfied. This is more of a lunch idea, but I think it's hearty enough if you want to serve it for dinner. I'm making some hard-boiled eggs because there's nothing better than a fresh piece of sourdough bread topped with some avocado or some eggs. It's just so good. And in case you are not aware, a little trick for peeling these eggs is add a tablespoon of baking soda to the water when you're boiling your eggs. And then when you take it out, shock it with some ice water and then kind of tap it all over and roll it a bit on the counter, and that gets the shell off very easily. So this bread, as I mentioned, is half whole wheat flour and half all-purpose flour. I like doing half and half because the all-purpose flour really helps it to develop that structure that you want in bread. For this specific type of bread, because it's not in a pan, it's a little harder to do 100% whole wheat, but it can be done, and I'm working on it, trying to find a recipe that's a little more than 50% whole wheat. So I'm just topping it with some smashed avocado, some hard-boiled egg, and some everything but the bagel seasoning, as well as a little bit of salt and pepper. And this is like the best lunch. So good. I did a whole video on how to make your own artisan sourdough bread at home, so I won't cover that in this video, but I'm leaving a link here on the screen and a link in the description. All you need to do is cut your butternut squash open in half, cover it with olive oil, about a tablespoon, and a teaspoon of salt. And then you're gonna bake it you're gonna turn it upside down, and bake it at 400 for about 30 minutes or so. We'll see how long it actually takes. You just wanna be able to poke a knife through the skin and it will easily go through. While that is roasting, you're gonna get going on your sauce. So first you're gonna wanna chop up a whole onion and 4 cloves of garlic. You're gonna saute the onion in a tablespoon of olive oil and a teaspoon of salt. Let that go. While that is cooking, you can shred your cheeses. I'm using my Vitamix, and I'm putting in a whole lot of Parmesan and blending it on high speed to turn it into a powder. Now you need to cook your pasta, so bring a pot of water to a boil and add in a handful of salt, trust me on this, and let that boil for about 8 minutes. And then you're gonna season up your onions by adding in garlic and seasonings. I did a teaspoon of thyme, a half teaspoon of rosemary and oregano, and a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. Let that go for another minute or so. I am thawing out some bone broth because I'm gonna need a little bit of that. Transfer your pasta to a baking dish, and then you want to add a half cup of broth to your veggies. I didn't have any thawed, so this was my method of getting a half cup of liquid in the pan. You know, you just gotta do what you gotta do sometimes. Now you can turn off the heat here and move on to shredding your cheeses. I used Gruyere and Fontina. For this, you only need about 1.5 cups. You're just topping it with cheese. I have been waiting to use this cheese for the perfect meal, and I think I found it. It's very French, I think. I just know I don't normally buy it, and I'm excited to use it. The butternut squash is done roasting, and now you can move on to making your sauce. I just left the Parmesan cheese in the blender. I took some of it out just to save and left a 1/2 cup in the blender, and then added in your butternut squash, all of those veggies, another teaspoon of salt, and then I also added in a 1/2 cup of half and half. And then as you blend this, if it's too thick, you can thin it out with more half and half, or you can put in some more broth. We call this dish butternut squash mac and cheese because the sauce does taste very cheesy. There's only a 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese in the sauce, but it turns out really decadent and has a nice French flair to it. I normally add some sage to this as well, but because I didn't have it on hand, I ended up using the thyme and rosemary, but it tasted amazing. However, I would say add some sage as well if you have it, just a half teaspoon or a teaspoon. Mix it into your pasta, and then if it's too thick, just use some water or more broth to just thin it out so that that sauce is able to mix freely with the noodles, because when you bake it, it will dry out a little bit more because of evaporation. So you do want that to be wet and easy to mix. Then you're going to top it with those cheeses I mentioned, and you're going to bake it in the oven at 350 for about 30 minutes until the cheese is nice and bubbly and melted, and those flavors have had some time to really meld into each other. This is an amazing dish that is fun to make. I love making it because I don't need to thaw out any meat. It's always a win for me. And everyone eats it without complaints. I think it's super delicious. We love the leftovers, and I posted the full recipe on my blog. So if anything was unclear, you can go to the link in my description and you can print out the recipe and get all the details you need. Yeah, it's like mac and cheese. Thumbs up. Thumbs up or down? Yeah. I will link the recipe down below. This is just a sourdough discard blueberry muffin, and I'm using freshly milled whole grains. The batter was a little bit more on the dense side, probably because of the freshly milled flour, so I just kept adding a little bit more milk until it was fully incorporated. This did cause it to turn a bit purple, which I expected, but that's okay. Now we're supposed to press the crumb topping gently. Someone's gonna get a good bite right there. Cheers to spring break. Cheers. This is so amazingly good. It's like a cupcake, but it's not.
I'll eat it.
I love it. The secret ingredient in this recipe are these split pigeon peas. I just bought a big bag at Costco one day because they're very high in protein. And I just thought, that sounds nice. For this Instant Pot tomato soup, just give 3 to 4 whole carrots a rough chop, as well as a whole onion and 4 cloves of garlic. I forgot to add a red pepper, but you can add that. You can also add other veggies if you'd like. You can experiment here. Turn on the saute function on your Instant Pot. Make sure it's very hot. Add 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Saute your veggies. Add a teaspoon of salt to sweat those veggies, and then add in garlic a little later along with all of your seasonings and tomato paste. I used 2 teaspoons of salt, a teaspoon of pepper, a teaspoon of dried oregano, a teaspoon of dried basil. Optional, you can add a tablespoon of honey here and give it all a good mix to really bloom all those flavors together. And then I added a small handful of walnuts and just toast those up a little bit. And then you're gonna add, I did add a teaspoon of chili powder here. I just wanted to try that. And then you can add in a cup of split pigeon peas. This is what's gonna add all that protein to this tomato soup. And the tomatoes really mask the flavor of this. Then you're gonna add in your homemade, hopefully homemade chicken broth, but you can use any chicken broth here. I used about 4 cups and a can of crushed tomatoes. San Marzano is preferred, but I just had a cheap can of crushed tomatoes from Aldi available, and that works just fine as well. Put the lid back on, seal it, set it for 15 minutes, and let that cook. When your soup is done cooking, it's going to be piping hot, so be careful as you use an immersion blender to puree the whole soup until it's smooth, and then add in about a half cup of cream or half and half, and then a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar. I like to serve this with grilled cheese sandwiches on homemade bread if you have it.
He doesn't really have to, and he walked. It was so fun.
Oh yeah, go ahead and put that over here.
Please? Mom, can I please have this?
Good job. You want to keep an eye on this for me, Joseph? Let
me
just butter it.
I can flip it, please. Can I
okay, Felicity wants to do first. I posted the full recipe for this soup on my blog, which is linked below. This is such a great, comforting meal that my whole family loves. And if you are making the bread yourself and making the broth yourself, this ends up being a super affordable dinner for a family of 6. All right, now I'm gonna get dinner going. I'm gonna share with you one of my all-time favorite slow cooker meals. I've shared this before and you guys have loved it too, so I thought it was time to make it again. So tonight I'm making French dip sandwiches. All right, so this is a really easy, really delicious meal that you can make in your slow cooker. I have some leftover bone marrow here from when I made bone broth the other day. So this is basically just like the marrow. It's really good for adding flavor and it has fat in it. So I'm gonna use that as my cooking fat, and I'm gonna turn my slow cooker on to the saute function. I'm gonna season it really well with salt and pepper, sear it. Then I'm gonna add all this seasoning. I'm gonna add some bone broth and just let it slow cook all day. It's gonna be like a really delicious like au jus sauce. All right, this recipe is on my blog, but I'm also gonna just share it with you and tell you what I do. Most of my recipes are really adaptable so that you can kind of throw what you have in there and it should still turn out good, because that's, I think, how most busy moms actually cook. After searing your meat well on both sides, you're gonna add all the seasonings. I'm doing a 1/4 cup of onion flakes, 1 teaspoon of a umami blend, a teaspoon of onion powder or this blend, which is really good, by the way, a teaspoon of smoked paprika, 2 teaspoons of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of pepper, 1 teaspoon of celery seed, and a teaspoon of salt. Then you'll add in 1.5 cups to 2 cups of your hopefully homemade beef bone broth, and mine is unsalted. Putting together some quick pickled red onions. I like to have these on hand, especially for sandwiches And these French dip sandwiches are so good with this. So I'm putting some apple cider vinegar in a jar. I'm using a sieve because there's some sediment in the jar. And now I'm adding some peppercorns, a half teaspoon of salt, and a half teaspoon of sugar. And then fill it up with some hot water and just let your onions marinate in that for like 30 minutes or so. And after that, you can put it in the fridge. But these will be ready to go for dinner tonight. I haven't showed you the meat yet, but it's been slow cooking all day and it's so good. So I'm cutting up some cheese for the sandwiches and some fresh parsley. I'm gonna put this in at the very end so it stays nice and fresh. And now I'm just gonna pull out my meat and shred it up. It should be fork tender after slow cooking for 10 hours. This is that au jus sauce I told you about. It is incredibly flavorful with all the seasonings and also the bone marrow that I put in there. So you serve the meat on top of a sandwich with some cheese. Usually people do provolone or Swiss. I just did some aged cheddar, and then drizzle a little bit of that sauce on the sandwich. And also I like to do red onions. And you can also serve some of the sauce on the side. And I promise you, you and your family are going to love this. So try it out. It's one of the easiest slow cooker meals you can make. This is another one of those meals that works really well for the freezer. You can put all your meat in a bag and dump your spice blend in there and try to mix it up well. Add a little bit of that bone broth and then stick it in the freezer. It's best if you take it out maybe the night before and put it in the fridge so it can thaw, but then just put it in the slow cooker for 10 hours on low. Now this lentil stew, it is so delicious. It's one of the first things I made in the slow cooker. I got a slow cooker as a wedding gift, and it's just one of the first things I tried, and I was surprised at how good it turned out. I didn't think it was going to be that great, and it was, and I've only improved upon it as I've made it time and time again. So I'm going to share it with you, and I hope you try it. I think it's such a great meatless meal. It's so cheap and easy to make, and it's nourishing and filling. So you're going to chop up your veggies. I have lots of carrots, a whole onion, lots of celery, and a sweet potato, 4 to 6 cloves of garlic, and 16 ounces of mushrooms. And then in the slow cooker, mine has a saute function, which really helps for this. I added in beef marrow. I had this left over from the broth that I made, and it does add a ton of flavor to this, but you could also use bacon fat or lard or olive oil. So you're going to saute your mushrooms in that first and get them to really absorb all that flavor, and then brown them a bit. And then you're going to add in the rest of your veggies. You just want to saute everything up to develop the flavors. Because this is a simple meal, you really want to do this part. It turns out a lot better. Add a teaspoon of salt to this and then cover it with the lid so that I can cook for 5 to 8 minutes or so just to develop those flavors. And then you're going to add in 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, your garlic, and your seasonings. I did a teaspoon of oregano, thyme, and rosemary. You can also do Italian seasoning. I also did some pepper, and then mix that together to let those flavors really develop, and then add in a can of tomatoes. Then I added about 4 cups of broth. I had more broth cooking, it just wasn't ready yet. And then I added a 14-ounce package of lentils, which had been rinsed. And because I didn't have enough broth, I covered it with some water just so it looked like enough liquid. And then you can set your slow cooker to high for 6 hours or low on 8 hours and just check on it throughout the day. Noah.
I'm making my first.
Watch out, boys. Watch out.
Wait, is the ball ready?
Yeah, it's burning hot.
I'm making frosting for the cupcakes. I read the instructions on how to flip it because you're supposed to flip it very, very slowly. Oh, yeah. I'm so glad I remembered to flip it.
I'm just adding some more bone broth here because it was looking a little dry.
Bring it all the way out so it's easy. Now grab it.
Lentil stew will be finished when the lentils are cooked through and it's looking thicker, more like a stew instead of a soup. I sometimes take the back of a spoon and try and smash some of the sweet potatoes to thicken up the stew some more. I add a splash of apple cider vinegar at the end, mix it in, and top it with some Parmesan cheese. And to really take it over the top, we serve it with some homemade bread and butter. This is a really delicious meal, and I hope you try it. I have linked it on my blog for you to check out. Good evening. It is dinner time and I am making loaded baked potatoes. I just learned a new method of cooking bacon. You're gonna lay it all out on a sheet pan like this. I lined mine with foil so that I don't have to clean the pan. And you're going to put this into a cold oven, turn it on to 400 degrees. Gotta wash my hands. Okay, we're gonna turn it on to 400 degrees. And about when it gets to 400 degrees, it will almost be done. So this prevents the bacon from burning and gives it that perfect crisp that we all love. I've actually never done it this way, so we'll find out if it's gonna work. So anyways, while this is cooking, I'm gonna get my potatoes ready and we'll get dinner going. I also need to clean my kitchen. The neat thing about this recipe is when you put the bacon in and you're preheating the oven, by the time the bacon is finished, the oven is ready for the potatoes to go in. I feel like this is a really efficient and streamlined way to cook dinner, and I can clean and do lots of other odds and ends while things are cooking. I like to use russet potatoes and sweet potatoes for this recipe. You just need to wash them, coat them in olive oil and salt. Also stab some holes in the sweet potatoes, and you may need to pull the sweet potatoes out before the russet potatoes. The oven is fully preheated, and oh my gosh, I'm here to tell you that it absolutely works. That looks so good. I'm using some of the oil from the bacon to get my skillet ready because I'm going to brown some ground beef and season that up with some onions and all sorts of things to put on top of the potatoes. I like this seasoning blend. I just picked it up one day at Costco. It works great as a savory seasoned blend, and I added some garlic, onion, smoked paprika, and pepper. So we're going for a savory spice mix instead of like a Mexican blend of spices. I'm also adding some tomato paste because it adds some umami to your dish. It just enhances the flavor. The potatoes are still baking. I put them in the oven at 425 for about 45 minutes. And then I am now preparing my toppings. I'm just doing some shredded lettuce and cheeses, sour cream, some quick pickled red onions, and crumbled up bacon. And then we'll add the ground beef as well. This all together makes a very, very delicious meal. And it's very filling and healthy. The whole family loves it. And each person can pick and choose what they want to do with their potato. I like to have these quick pickled red onions on hand. They're very easy to make and they make a great topping for sandwiches and tacos. You just add a half cup of very hot water into a jar and then a half cup of apple cider vinegar, a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of sugar, and some peppercorns. Just mix it up and let the red onions soak in that mixture. It will be ready in as quickly as 30 minutes, but tastes even better as it sits throughout the week in your fridge. For these chicken enchiladas, you start by cooking the chicken and shredding it. There are two ways that I like to do this. The first way is to put some chicken in an Instant Pot with a little bit of garlic powder, salt, and some chicken broth and set it for 15 minutes. and then let it depressurize for about 10 minutes and shred it. The other way is to put your chicken right into a Dutch oven, season it how you like, and then add 1/4 cup to a 1/2 cup of melted butter, and then mix that up, cover it with the lid, and set it in the oven at 275 for 3.5 to 4 hours. When it's done, it will be tender and so easy to shred and full of lots of flavor. And now I'm making the enchilada sauce. For this enchilada sauce, you're gonna make a spice blend. And this is basically gonna be all the flavor for your sauce. And into a small saucepan, you're gonna add 2 tablespoons of avocado oil and go ahead and get that nice and hot. Then you can add in 2 tablespoons of flour and just whisk that up, and we're gonna make a roux here. And then add in your spices, heat those up a little bit to kind of bring out the flavor. And then you're gonna add in 2 cups of chicken broth. I have some homemade bone broth that I made and I just grabbed from the freezer and I let that thaw. But you're gonna let this thicken, and then once you do all of the broth in there, you're going to let it simmer and thicken up for about 30 minutes, and later it will reduce down and look more like this. And now I'm sauteing some onions in a large saute pan. My garage fridge is almost empty now, just grabbing some shredded cheese, which I'll need for these enchiladas. Once again, this is a double batch. I'm adding 2 8-ounce cans of tomato sauce and 2 4-ounce cans of green chilies. Sometimes I add a can of diced tomatoes as well, but this time I did not, and I like how it turned out. I also added a little bit of chili powder and cumin to the shredded chicken, and then I started adding in about 2 cups of shredded cheeses. You can also add some beans to this if you like. I didn't have any on hand and I wasn't prepared to cook dry beans today, so I just went with that. I had some leftover shredded chicken, so I'm putting that in a container which we can use throughout the week for various meals. And now I'm going to assemble my enchiladas. Very self-explanatory, just put some meat in the tortilla and roll it up. I have some delicious homemade enchilada sauce that I made a couple of days ago, and I had it in the fridge, and I'm gonna use the rest of that for these freezer enchiladas. I made these differently in my last video because I didn't have tomato sauce, so this is a little more true to the recipe. But if you go back to my last video, which was about summer meals and snacks, you'll see exactly how to make this enchilada sauce. I really like it, and I also left the link in the description so you can have all the details and instructions. So now I'm just topping it with cheese, and then I'll cover it up and put it in the freezer. To bake it from frozen, I'm just guessing here, but I wrote on the foil to bake it at 375 for 30 minutes, and then to take the foil off and give it another 10 to 15 minutes. Now we are moving on to making the breakfast cookies I told you about. You're going to start by pulsing 1 cup of walnuts until it turns into this crumbly texture. Now I'm adding a 1.5 cups of old-fashioned rolled oats and giving them a quick pulse in the food processor. And then I'm adding in 1/3 cup of freshly milled flour, 1/2 cup of flax meal, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. So that's your dry mixture. And now we're going to mix together your wet mixture. All right, so in this bowl, I have 1/2 cup of almond butter, 1/4 cup of avocado oil, 1/4 cup of maple syrup, and 1/3 cup of brown sugar. Mix that up until it's combined, and then add in 1 egg and pulse it some more until it's just combined and sort of silky looking. Now into a mixing bowl, you're gonna add 1/2 cup of chocolate chips and 1/2 cup of dried craisins, and then start adding in the liquid mixture. This is going to be a thick and dense dough, so it's not gonna be super easy to mix, but I add a little tiny bit of water as needed, and I also added a tablespoon of coconut oil just to help bring everything together nicely. first make it into a ball like this, the ball, and then go like that. Yeah, and then go like this. Just kind of press it. Yeah, and then put it down. Yep. Can you get the chocolate chip you dropped? And then press it. Yep, and now put it down. And perfect. Look at that.
It's today's Saturday.
He needs to ride bikes first. Right when this is done. Right when this is done cooking, we're gonna go outside, okay, Noah? So these cookies will not spread out, so you can put them pretty close together. I like to do pretty large cookies and then press them down and bake them at 375 for about 11 minutes. I'm putting the rest of that freshly milled flour into a container for later and checking on my baked goods, giving the kitchen a good sweep. It's amazing how quick all these crumbs appear. And then I took the cookies out and I'm pressing them down because I like them to be a little more dense and doughy, and they turn out so good. So the coconut loaf turned out, it wasn't too wet, there was nothing wrong with it, so I'm glad to say that my mistake didn't ruin it. It just goes to show you how much flexibility you really do have when you're cooking food. You really don't need to worry too much. Just do what feels right, have fun, and enjoy yourself. So these are the cookies. I think they're really good. You should definitely try them. I'm hoping that my garden potatoes do grow so that I can make this again in the future using my own homegrown potatoes. There's nothing more exciting than cooking the food that you've grown. So I am boiling the potatoes a little bit in salted water, cutting up my peppers and onions. All during this time, the muffins are baking. Wow, the muffins look so yummy. Now my bacon is going in the oven. Just gonna turn the oven temperature up a little bit to 400. And now I'm checking my potatoes. All right, these are just a little bit tender. They're not cooked 100% of the way, which is what I want so they don't fall apart in the oven. Just a little bit later and my bacon is done. I'm gonna take some of that grease and just pour it into the pan so that I can saute my peppers and onions in that. Like whenever you want. I'm making it now. All I have to do is put it in the oven for like 30 minutes. Oh, the breeze is coming in.
I'm kind of like, it's so much work, and I'm like, oh, I have all this stuff to do too.
Yeah. Oh, the breeze feels so good. Good, and I'll just wash your hands.
Sponsored one.
I like how simple this recipe is. You just dump everything into a bowl and then you bake it in the oven whenever you want. I will link it down below. So I'm kind of thinking that with Easter right around the corner, that this might be a perfect meal to make for Easter, as well as the muffins. So if you're looking for ideas for Easter brunch, I think I gave you 2 pretty decent ideas today. I baked this casserole at 350 for 35 minutes until it was nice and golden and crispy. And if you don't use bacon, you can also try using sausage, and you can add more eggs if you'd like. We all really, really enjoyed it, so much so that pretty much the entire thing was gone in about 30 minutes. Just to keep things easy tonight, I pulled out my rice cooker and I'm cooking up some rice with some bone broth. I'm out of chili powder, forgot to get that. I used to not buy paper towels, but I do now for things like this. So I'm just I'm gonna season this a little bit, and then I'm gonna heat up the air fryer to 400, and I'm going to cook this for about like 9 minutes, maybe less. This skin, you don't need to cut it off because after you cook it, it will just easily fall off the skin. So I'm gonna give it a quick season here, stick it in. My rice is cooking, and then I have some veggies I'm gonna put in the bowl, an avocado, and a really quick and easy sauce. And that will be our dinner. It's one of my favorite meals. I wish salmon wasn't so expensive. It's definitely a treat, but I like to do it maybe once a month. Maybe we do more than that, but mostly we do like beef and chicken. All right, I think that's salty enough. Okay. So it's preheated, and now you add the salmon to the preheated air fryer, and you want to make sure it's spaced out. I'm going to do mine in 2 batches. I like to think of this meal as sort of sushi bowls. So I cook up the salmon, and then I layer rice and vegetables, and I create this sauce, which is chili crunch and mayo with a splash of rice vinegar. And I just sort of tried this out one night, and we really, really love it. So while the food is cooking, I'm just gonna keep moving and keep cleaning. And I also wanted to share with you these awesome little containers that I discovered. They are deli containers, but they're a little more sturdy. You can buy them off of Amazon. I'll leave my link in the description below. But they're great for like meal prep and just packing away little things like chopped up herbs, sauces, all sorts of things. They are lightweight and you can stack them. I'm just really happy with them. All right, my salmon is done. This is the second batch, and it is actually perfect. This is an easy and healthy meal that comes together really quickly. You're essentially just cooking rice and the salmon, and if you have an air fryer and a rice cooker, it just makes this even easier. I've left the links for my rice cooker and my air fryer below in the description, and I hope that you try this out, and I hope you like it. My sushi bowls are never exactly the same. Sometimes I make a cucumber salad first with toasted sesame seed oil, rice vinegar, and a tiny splash of maple syrup, and then I mix that in with the bowl, which is really good. I'm making fish tacos, and I'm using a recipe from Joshua Weissman's cookbook. I think he is a food genius, and I will try almost anything that he puts out. And so for this, I am making a slaw to go with the fish tacos. This is a very simple slaw, but it turns out very, very good. I'm just shredding everything in the food processor. I'm doing half a head of cabbage, a red onion, 2 carrots, and a handful of cilantro. You're gonna put that into a bowl, and then you're gonna add in the zest and juice of 2 Meyer lemons or regular lemons. Mix that up and add in about 2 tablespoons of olive oil and some salt and pepper to taste. This is so simple, and yet it's crazy good, so you should definitely try it. I'm gonna stick this in the fridge and move on to making the sauce for the fish tacos. So I'm pulling out my homemade mayo and sour cream, and in a new jar, I'm going to add a half cup of sour cream and a half cup of mayo. Now for all the flavor, I'm going to add a tablespoon of hot sauce, 2 teaspoons of smoked paprika, a tablespoon of chili oil, and a tablespoon and a half of black rice vinegar, but I did not have that, so I did just regular rice vinegar. And then you're going to grate 2 cloves of garlic. All right, so now that that is done, I'm gonna make some corn tortillas, which I've never done before, but I got masa harina. I'm probably butchering how you say that. And I'm gonna try and make them now. Hopefully it's pretty simple. I do not have a tortilla press, but I did see directions on how to make it without one. So we'll see if this works. We need 2 cups. 3/4 teaspoon of salt and 1.5 cups of hot water. You're supposed to knead this for like 2 minutes, and if it sticks to your hand, if it's still sticking to your hand, then it's too wet and you have to add more flour. Okay, this is what we have. Ta-da! Press it down all the way, straight, nice and straight and flat.
What are you making?
I mean, it's tiny. We're making tacos.
Ew, I do not like them.
Ah, doesn't look good. Oh my gosh.
Ooh, cheese ball.
Okay, well, it does work.
Cheese ball! It's not cheese ball.
Oh yeah, okay. Okay, it works. Alright, I'll put it in a hot pan. For the fish, I'm using cod and I'm patting it dry, seasoning it with salt, and searing it in avocado oil in a very hot pan for a couple minutes on each side. And then I'm just going to use that for the fish tacos. Very, very simple. I'm not frying them, I'm just searing them. And now you just assemble your very simple fish taco with fish, slaw, and the sauce on top. This was beyond delicious, which is why I love to cook recipes from cookbooks of professional chefs, because they just know their stuff and you end up learning a lot. So these flavors, they were simple, but they were so good. All right, the tortilla's holding together. I don't know if you can see that. Wow. Holy cow. Now Joshua Weissman, he did it again. The sauce with the coleslaw, and then just like the simple plain fish. So good. I recently bought this amazing local grass-fed organic chuck roast from a small little butcher shop nearby, and it was pricey, and so I wanted to use it on something special, and I decided to make chuck roast tacos, which I have not ever done before. I love chuck roast, but I've never used it as like a shredded taco meat, so I'm trying that here. I did your typical spices for tacos. I did cumin, chili powder, oregano, onion, garlic, pepper, salt. I'm gonna rub it all over the chuck roast and get it seasoned really well. So I'm heating up olive oil in a nice Dutch oven pan, getting all the seasoning and garlic in the crevices of the meat as best I can. And I'm gonna saute some onion and garlic first, get that just flavor on the bottom of the pan, and then I'm going to sear the meat a little bit on each side just to sort of lock in the flavor. And then I'm gonna add the lime juice all over the top. This recipe is just sort of one I've made up. As I've mentioned in other videos, I am sort of an aspiring home chef. Just what I mean by that is I really want to be good at cooking. I want to like know what I'm doing in the kitchen and just be able to like throw things together without any problems. I just think that would be a nice skill to have, and it's something I've been working on pretty much ever since I got married. When I first got married at the age of 21, I didn't know how to cook, and I've had a lot of fun just learning lots of skills. And I really feel like I came alive when I got married and my life really began. I started learning and doing lots of new things, and I just haven't stopped. This is my daughter. She's helping me with We're making sourdough tortillas. These didn't turn out super amazing or anything, but they were fine. They were edible. We got it on the table. I've also been using freshly milled wheat. And so we tried that for the tortillas, which made them a little bit more rustic, but it was perfectly fine and good. So the meat, I cooked it low and slow for about 3 hours at 325. And then after those 3 hours, I took it out, shredded it up. And then this time I put it back in with no lid. I cranked up the heat to 425 and cooked it for another 25 to 30 minutes or so until the meat was nice and crispy. And then now I'm just rolling out the tortillas. I have a cast iron pan that is on low to medium behind me. And I'm just going to one by one cook these tortillas. I was actually able to hand this job over to my daughter. And then my son ended up having a fun time watching these bubble up and flipping them for me. So I ended up passing this job off to my 11-year-old and my 8-year-old, and they handled it beautifully. So if you have kids, you don't be afraid to get them cooking in the kitchen. They find a lot of satisfaction in doing that, and it also helps them, the kids, to eat healthier because they feel good that they helped make the food. The meat turned out so amazing. It was extra crispy and flavorful. That's just the way I like it for tacos. And so if you've never used a chuck roast for tacos, let this be your sign to give it a shot. We could have used some extra toppings on these tacos, but we really didn't have much left in the fridge, and I didn't want to leave the house at all this week. And so we just relied on your basic cheese and sour cream and lettuce, and it was great.
These are the beef marrow bones that I'm using today. They have a lot of good stuff right in the middle there. All that marrow will melt out when I roast it, and I'm gonna save the marrow for cooking and just like adding flavor to almost anything. It's really good for you. So if you get your hands on some good marrow bones, definitely save the marrow and use it for things.
I like to use my air fryer for roasting the bones. I do it at 400 for about 30 minutes, and this just speeds it up and it does a really good job. I'm putting the bones into the Instant Pot, which is filled with filtered water, and I'm gonna set that for 4 hours on high. Here's all that marrow. I'm pouring it into a glass jar to save it, and this will solidify.
My dough got so big while we were at church. I guess it's getting warmer, and so everything is moving a lot faster than I'm used to. Going to shred my butter, and I'm going to put it in one of these loaves. This is frozen butter, so kind of like making croissants, but this is like a fast cheater version. Okay, so my bones have been in the Instant Pot for the past 4 hours. I released the pressure, and now I'm going to add in all these veggies and go for another hour.
This bone broth will basically become like a thick gelatin when I put it in the refrigerator, so that's how I know it is super good for you. I'm salting the stew meat just to get it ready for later.
320. It doesn't like flying. That's so smart. Tornado. That's accurate. It's like whenever she got like.
I'm prepping all the veggies now for our Sunday stew. I really like making beef stew. It's one of my favorite meals to make. I just feel like you can throw anything in the pot and it ends up tasting amazing. I think the basic formula for a stew is you want to season your meat well, sear it, then remove it from the pan, and then in that same fat, maybe add a little more fat. You can saute all your veggies, some garlic, maybe some tomato paste for some additional flavor, and then add in your seasonings and then fill it up with broth and just add flavoring as needed and let it simmer for a while. It should turn out amazing. My bone broth is ready. I'm just setting it in the sink to cool down because I wanted to try to strain it and skim off the fat, but it needs to be cold in order to do that. I was a little short on time.
Ooh, that looks so good.
Yeah, go change.
A simple flavor combo that I like in my stew is 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, a teaspoon of paprika, and then a generous splash of apple cider vinegar. And then, of course, your bone broth. The croissant bread turned out amazing. Just listen to that crackle there. The longer you can let your stew simmer, the better. I didn't have a lot of time, but your meat will be more tender if you give it lots of time and cook it low and slow. I always try to keep beef stew meat in my freezer just for nights like this. Now I'm making a fresh salad. I'm starting off with some green dressing from this cookbook from the Sprouted Kitchen. I have 2 of her cookbooks and I really enjoy how she uses fresh food, fresh vegetables and herbs and creates lots of different flavors. So I find myself going back to this cookbook a lot. Into the food processor, I'm doing 2 cloves of garlic, some green onions, about a cup of fresh cilantro, about 2 cups of packed basil leaves, and 3/4 cup of parsley, a half teaspoon of salt, pepper, and a 1/4 teaspoon of red pepper flakes. Now I'm adding the zest and juice of a whole lemon, and a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar, and a tablespoon of honey. Now I'm adding in a cup of Greek yogurt, which makes this a high protein dressing, and also a 1/4 cup of olive oil and a 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese. Blend that up until it turns into a beautiful green dressing. I love working with fresh herbs. It makes everything so colorful and flavorful. It's even more satisfying when I can pick the herbs from my own garden. So if you're gonna grow anything, I would say you get the most bang for your buck if you grow fresh herbs. And a lot of them are perennials, so they come back every year. For dinner, I'm just doing some simple roasted veggies and a salad, and I'm gonna put that chicken on the smoker. So it should just be a very fresh and simple dinner, but with lots of flavor. For the carrots, I'm roasting them with a tablespoon or 2 of olive oil, a half teaspoon of salt, and a half teaspoon of cumin. And I'll roast it at 400 for about 25 minutes until it looks like it's done. While I'm waiting for the oven to preheat, I'm gonna chop up some potatoes. This is kind of like my lazy roasted potato method. I just chop it up like this. I didn't even line the pan. I'm gonna do about 2 tablespoons of olive oil, maybe that's 3 tablespoons, a teaspoon of salt, and that's it. Mix it up really well and just bake that at about 400 or 425 for maybe 30 to 45 minutes until it's nice and crispy. I have it on the lower rack now, but I'm gonna move it to the upper rack when the carrots are done.
Got lots of fresh produce for tonight.
salads with a lot of stuff in them. So I'm doing an avocado, a cucumber, half of a zucchini, and I'm salting the lettuce first and then adding in a squeeze of lemon juice. So this kind of pre-seasons the lettuce. I think it makes a big difference. I'm adding in a little bit of pumpkin seed and sesame seed for some crunch and nutrition. And now using up the rest of that green dressing. This salad ended up being so delicious. I could eat the whole thing with a spoon. It was so yummy. But I'm putting this to the side for now while I'm waiting for everything else to finish. The carrots are done, and now I'm just flipping the potatoes, and then I'm gonna put them back in the oven for a little bit longer. To finish off the carrots, I'm gonna add a little splash of lemon juice, some fresh parsley, and a sprinkle more of salt. And I promise you, this is a simple and very delicious carrot recipe. For some reason, cumin really takes carrots up to the next level for me.
Well, I burnt the potatoes a little bit, but that's okay. We will all still eat these. Still delicious, a little crispy.
This is one of those meals where you don't need a recipe. You just want to create a yummy dressing and roast some veggies and grill some meat, and you have a delicious dinner. I love using the bread machine and a little bit of yeast and making these sourdough discard buns. It comes together with minimal effort, and I can have it ready by dinner time, which really helps. I'm also making some roasted sweet potatoes right now. I'm gonna bake that at the same time that I'm baking the buns so that I can have a side sweet potato salad. This is a great way to make chicken. You want to cover it with water and add in a tablespoon of peppercorns, cumin, yellow mustard seed, and some bay leaves, and a tablespoon of salt. You're going to bring that to a boil. The chicken, you want to make sure it's under the water and then bring it down to a simmer for about 20 minutes. My buns are finished. They look awesome. I'm brushing them with a little bit of butter and preparing the rest of the produce for my chicken salad. When the 20 minutes is up, just turn the heat off on your chicken, and when you're ready, you can take it out of the pot. It's good to let it rest for a few minutes, and then you want to chop it up as small as you can for the chicken salad. I'm adding in a tablespoon of Dijon mustard, a teaspoon of garlic powder, a squeeze of lemon juice, and about a half cup of mayo. I went a little bit light on the mayo. I think it could have used some more. But I didn't want to add too much to this. My husband does not eat too much sugar, and so I have two versions, one with grapes and honey in it and the other without that. And then this is the potato salad. I just added a little bit of mayo to this and some red wine vinegar. And then I thought I would add a little bit to my husband's chicken salad, so he had a little bit of sweetness. He can eat sweet potatoes fine. And then that turned out so good looking that I ended up just adding the whole thing, the rest of it, to ours. And so I thought this was pretty good, having some sweet potato mixed in there as well. And then this is our dinner. We just had a simple chicken salad sandwich for dinner. I just wanted something simple and fresh, and I didn't use up all the chicken. Some of it was put into the freezer, and since it's already cooked and ready to go, I'll be able to whip up another meal another night without having to cook the chicken. For dinner, I wanted to make some chicken soup. My daughter had a sore throat, and I thought this would be the perfect meal for a snowy evening. I also had some Nourishing bone broth that was ready to be used. If you saw my last video, I shared how I make bone broth in the Instant Pot, and this time I used the carcass of a whole chicken that we had cooked a while back and I had put the bones in the freezer, so I had that ready to go for this soup tonight. Before I make the chicken, I'm gonna first cook the chicken breasts. So you're gonna sear the chicken really well on each side, and then you can put the lid on your pot and turn the stove down to low, set a timer for 10 minutes, and then turn the stove off completely and set another timer for 10 minutes, and your chicken breasts will be perfect. They will be tender and easy to cut. So I'm also gonna add some fresh parsley and a lot of minced garlic. These are all great for your immune system when you're sick. I also have yellow miso paste and lemon, which I'm gonna use as a bit of a flavor boost for this soup. Let that liquid reduce down from the chicken. You may need to add a little bit of extra oil here and then saute your veggies. Add a teaspoon of salt and then put the lid on top and be patient because the veggies will release a lot of flavor during this time. I just went out into the freezing cold to get sage, and it is frozen, but I think it's still gonna be good and it's gonna be worth it. So here's my frozen sage. Then push your veggies to the side of the pan, add a little bit of olive oil and saute your garlic, your herbs, and then also I added a little bit of miso here. For my dry herbs, I used a teaspoon of thyme. Give those all about a minute and then add in your chicken, all of your chicken broth, and season it with salt and pepper to taste and let it simmer for as long as you need to. Obviously, the longer it simmers, the more the flavor develops, but you also don't want your veggies turning into mush. I served this with a splash of lemon juice and also some fresh parsley. And then of course I had to make some of my same day sourdough bread. So we had some warm bread and butter with this delicious soup. As you can see, it doesn't require a lot of expensive or fancy ingredients, and a home-cooked meal is a simple joy that adds that atmosphere of love and comfort and togetherness to your home. This video is all about meal prep. I feel like I always need ideas and inspiration, so I hope that this helps you get some food on the table for your family this week. I cooked a big pork shoulder butt on Sunday. At the end of the day, I shredded the meat and I stuck it in the fridge. And then on this night when I was ready to eat it, I roasted the sweet potatoes and Brussels sprouts. And then I put that shredded pork into a hot saute pan with avocado oil, and I sauteed it up with some oregano. And then when you do this, the meat gets really crispy. It renders the fat out and makes that pork so delicious and great for topping in a bowl. So as that's going, I made the dressing. I had some leftover avocado Caesar dressing, which is basically like homemade mayo and avocado, and some, I can't remember exactly what's in it, but essentially it's mayo, avocado, garlic, and lemon. And this turned out incredibly tasty on top of the bowls that we made. So the sweet potatoes are supposed to roast at about 425 for 45 minutes or so, and the Brussels sprouts obviously only need like 15 to 20 minutes. But I did take these sweet potatoes out too soon because my husband was heading out and I was trying to hurry and get dinner on the table before he left, and this ended up causing some problems for me. But the Brussels sprouts turned out great. So you just mix those together. This is the filling for the bowl, and it's supposed to go on top of smashed sweet potatoes. And here I am trying to smash them and they just were too hard. It was not working. So I put them back in the oven, I cranked up the heat, and then I tried it again. And this time they were able to smash down, and you put those in the bowl and you top it with the meat and the sauce, and it is actually so perfect. Way better than I even anticipated. This is one meal that we loved and we will definitely make again. Well, that was a long video. When I went back through all of my videos to put together this one, I couldn't believe how much content I have created over the past year. It's been so much fun sharing with you guys, and if you made it through this whole video, please leave a comment below and say hi. You mean so much to me. I'm so grateful you're here, and I will see you in my next video.